She was 6 years old when she wrote to agents and chose this life herself. By 13, she was famous. By 35, she built a show that lasted 14 years. She helped bring back one of the biggest sitcoms in television history, then watched a single tweet blow the whole thing apart in one afternoon. And what one former co-star said about her afterward was so dark, so personal, that people still cannot quite believe it was real. Now the headlines say things are falling apart for Sara Gilbert. But the truth is stranger than any of them admit. Sara Rebecca Gilbert was born on January 29, 1975, in Santa Monica, California, into a real show business family. Her half-sister is Melissa Gilbert, the star of Little House on the Prairie, and her half-brother is actor Jonathan Gilbert. Acting was part of everyday life around her, so the world of television never felt far away. Still, the detail that says the most about Sara Gilbert comes from when she was 6 years old. Over the years, she has shared a family story about watching her siblings work and deciding that she wanted to act too. What stands out is that she did not simply drift into it because of the family she came from. She pushed for it herself and even wrote to agents. That choice mattered from the start. She was not just a child being guided into a career. She was already making deliberate moves and shaping her own future. That mix of instinct and determination would stay with her for years. Even as a child, Sara Gilbert approached her life with intention. That focus paid off early. At 13, she landed the role that made her famous. In 1988, Roseanne premiered on ABC, and Gilbert was cast as Darlene Connor, the sharp, dry, deeply intelligent middle child in a working-class family from Illinois. Darlene felt different from almost every other teenage girl on television at the time. She was not cheerful for the sake of it. She was not polished into something easy or decorative. She was funny in a cutting way, serious in a way that felt real, and often unimpressed by the world around her. In a sitcom era full of bright, bubbly kids, Darlene stood apart the moment she appeared. Viewers responded to that honesty, and critics did too. Over the course of the original series, Darlene changed from an athletic tomboy into a moody, gifted young writer, and the character never felt forced. A big part of that came from Gilbert herself. She played Darlene with a natural ease that seemed far beyond her age. As the years passed, she grew up in front of millions of people. Yet she never slipped into the familiar child star story that so often ends in chaos. Her work stayed grounded, and so did she. At the same time, Roseanne became one of the biggest shows in America. It ran from 1988 to 1997 and often held the top spot on television. The show stood out because it showed working-class life in a way network television usually avoided. Money was tight, jobs were tiring, the house was messy, the family argued often, loved each other deeply, and felt believable in every scene. Gilbert earned 2 Primetime Emmy nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series in 1993 and 1994, and she did that while she was still a teenager. What makes her story even more impressive is what she did alongside all that fame. She never let success pull her away from her education. Gilbert took time away and attended Yale University, graduating in 1997 with a degree in art. That matters because it shows the same pattern again. Even while she was one of the most recognizable young actresses in the country, she kept her eye on something bigger. While many child stars lost their footing, Sara Gilbert kept building a life that would last. One of the details that still surprises people comes from the 1992 erotic thriller Poison Ivy, in which Gilbert appeared with Drew Barrymore. Gilbert has openly said that her first kiss with a girl was with Drew Barrymore, and that it happened partly as preparation for the film. She has told the story herself with the dry humor that has always been part of her public voice. Because of that, the story has lasted. It sounds almost too wild to be true, yet it came straight from Gilbert. What gives that moment real weight is what it connects to in her larger life. Sara Gilbert's path to living openly as a gay woman took time, and that mattered because of the era she came through. She was a well-known actress in the 1990s, when being openly gay in Hollywood still carried real risk. Many people in the industry stayed quiet because the consequences could be serious. Gilbert eventually came out publicly, and since then she has become one of the most steady and matter-of-fact LGBTQ figures in mainstream television. She did not build that presence around spectacle. She simply lived honestly, worked openly, and treated her family life as something normal and worthy of no apology. That honesty was there in her personal life too. She had two children, son Levi Hank and daughter Sawyer Jane, with her former partner, television writer Allison Adler. The family they built took shape during a time when very few stars with Gilbert's level of visibility were living so openly. That is one reason her story matters. Whatever dramatic narratives people try to attach to her now, the actual movement of her life has gone toward greater freedom. It helps to remember how unusual that openness really was at the time. When Gilbert was building her family and living publicly as a gay woman, there were very few television actresses at her level doing the same. There was no clear model to follow. There was no promise that it would leave her career untouched. The culture offered far less protection than it does now. Even so, she never turned her life into a public campaign or a grand performance. She kept going, kept working, and let the truth of her life sit in plain view. By the time she was co-hosting The Talk, her family was simply part of who she was on national daytime television. That quiet steadiness said a great deal about how she moved through the world. This is the part of Sara Gilbert's story that makes her range impossible to ignore. It is also the part that clearly answers anyone who still sees her as a former child actress whose best years were behind her. In 2010, Sara Gilbert created a daytime talk show. She did not just appear on it, she built it. The idea, inspired in part by her own experience as a new mother and her wish for a place where women could talk honestly about everyday life, became The Talk on CBS. The format drew from the panel model that daytime television already knew well. Yet Gilbert shaped it into a space centered on conversation about news, culture, parenting, and personal experience. The talk premiered on October 18, 2010. From there it grew into something durable. The show ran for 14 seasons, won a Daytime Emmy, and became a familiar part of American daytime television for more than a decade. All of that came from Gilbert's idea. She conceived it, helped develop it, served as an executive producer, and sat at the table as a co-host for years. The original panel included Julie Chen, Sharon Osbourne, Holly Robinson Peete, Lee Remini, and Marissa Jarrett Winokur. Over time, the show became known for its warmth, and also for the public tension that sometimes surrounded its changing lineup. Through all of that, Gilbert remained the calm, thoughtful presence at the center. She was the person who built the room in the first place. That detail matters because it connects so clearly with the rest of her career. Again and again, she has made television that treats ordinary life as worth serious attention. Once you sit with that, her public image starts to look very different. Many people still think of Sara Gilbert first as Darlene from Roseanne. The fuller truth is much bigger. At 35, she created a network television show that would last for 14 years and support the work of dozens of people. That is not a lucky turn. That is a major achievement built through judgment, patience, and real creative control. In 2019, she stepped back from hosting The Talk and said she was leaving to focus on her family and other projects. That move fits the larger pattern too. She left on her own terms during one of the strongest stretches of the show's life. The show itself, eventually came to an end. CBS announced that the talk would wrap after 14 seasons, and it finished in late 2024. Even then, its place in television was already secured. It stood as one of the longest-running daytime talk shows of its era, and it existed because Sara Gilbert saw the shape of it before anyone else did. She brought back Roseanne. This part of the story should have ended the tired idea that Sara Gilbert was fading long ago. She did not simply return for one of television's biggest revivals. She helped make it happen. The chain of events is clear. During an episode of The Talk, Gilbert took part in a comedy sketch where she brought back Darlene, with John Goodman appearing again as Dan Connor. What looked like a fun reunion quickly opened the door to something much bigger. That small moment led to serious conversations about bringing the whole series back. Gilbert became the force that pushed those talks forward. She was the person who could reconnect the cast, help shape the project, and persuade network executives that the revival could work. Then in 2018, 21 years after the original series ended, Roseanne returned to ABC. The comeback was huge. When the revival premiered on March 27, 2018, it became the most-watched television show in America. It reportedly drew around 20 million viewers and even beat The Big Bang Theory, which was then the biggest network comedy on the air. For Gilbert, who served as an executive producer, it was one of the most striking accomplishments of her career. ABC renewed the show right away. The numbers were so large that they became part of the story themselves. A working-class family sitcom had returned and suddenly outperformed everything else on television. At that moment in American culture, with deep tensions around class and politics, the success of the show was treated as a sign that a large part of the country still saw itself in the Connors. That made the revival feel bigger than nostalgia. It felt connected to the national mood. And behind that return was Sara Gilbert, working less as a former sitcom star and more as the producer who knew how to bring the whole machine back to life. She had sensed there was still an audience waiting for the show. She believed people were not done with it, and she acted on that belief. For a time, she was completely right. Then everything changed in a single afternoon, and the way Sara Gilbert responded would become one of the most debated moments of her career. On May 29, 2018, Roseanne star Roseanne Barr posted a tweet about Valerie Jarrett, a former senior advisor to President Barack Obama. The tweet was racist. It compared Jarrett, a black woman, to an ape. Barr deleted it soon after, but by then the screenshot had already spread everywhere. The reaction came fast and it was huge. At the center of that storm was Sara Gilbert, the same person who had helped bring Barr back into the spotlight and helped build the revival around her. Gilbert was not only a co-star. She was also an executive producer. She had worked to bring the show back, and now its star had posted something that could not be defended. Gilbert responded without hesitation. She wrote, "Roseanne's recent comments about Valerie Jarrett and so much more are abhorrent and do not reflect the beliefs of our cast and crew or anyone associated with our show." According to reporting, Gilbert's tweet came 27 minutes before ABC announced it was canceling the show. ABC pulled the plug that same day, killing the #1 program on American television at the peak of its ratings. When Gilbert returned to the talk on June 4, 2018, she addressed it directly, visibly emotional. "A lot of people have been hurt by this. I will say I'm proud of the show we made. The show has always been about diversity, love, and inclusion, and it's sad to see it end in this way." She also notably did not disown Barr as a person. She told the Washington Post that while she was extremely disappointed and heartbroken over the show's dissolution, Barr will always be family, and I will always love Roseanne. She added that Barr had told her the revival was going to be her redemption. Roseanne Barr did not see it that way. What followed became one of the nastiest public feuds in modern television, and it gave people the truly shocking quotes that so many clickbait headlines hint at but rarely show. Barr came to blame Sara Gilbert directly and intensely for the collapse of both the show and her career. In an interview with the Washington Post, Barr said Gilbert's tweet had destroyed the show and my life. Then she added the line that has stayed attached to this feud ever since. Reaching for a reference from The Silence of the Lambs and its cannibal villain Hannibal Lecter, Barr said of Gilbert, "She will never get enough until she consumes my liver with a fine Chianti." That was not gossip or rumor. It was a real quote from a real interview spoken by one former co-star about another, and it stunned people for a reason. A major television star was publicly describing the woman who had helped revive her career in the language of a horror villain. Barr later gave her own version of events on the Megyn Kelly show. She said Gilbert had personally begged her to come back for the revival and had promised to protect her. According to Barr, Gilbert had told her, "I've got your back this time. I won't let anyone at you. I won't let anyone hurt you. I'm going to protect you." Then came Gilbert's public condemnation, and Barr said she was left completely floored. Since then, Barr has said she confronted Gilbert in anger and has returned again and again to the idea that Gilbert betrayed her. Still, the basic context matters and it has to stay clear. Roseanne Barr posted the racist tweet. That part is not disputed. She deleted it, apologized at the time, and accepted responsibility even while mentioning Ambien. Sara Gilbert did not write that tweet. What Gilbert did was publicly condemn racism connected to a show she helped lead. She chose not to defend something she believed should not be defended. Some people see that as betrayal. Others see it as simple decency. That divide has never really gone away. Yet the first cause of everything was Barr's tweet, and Gilbert was not the one who sent it. It is worth looking at both sides honestly because this is the one part of Gilbert's story where feelings and judgment still collide. From Barr's point of view, the hurt was real. She says Gilbert brought her back, promised support, and then publicly condemned her almost at once before she even had the chance to explain herself. For someone who believed loyalty had been promised, that kind of public response could feel deeply personal. Even when the original mistake was her own, the pain she describes still sounds human. Gilbert's side is just as real. She was an executive producer with responsibility to a cast, a crew, and a show that had been presented as a story about diversity, love, and inclusion. Once Barr posted something racist, silence would have carried its own meaning. Protecting one person in that moment would have placed a burden on everyone else. In that view, Gilbert did not destroy the show. Barr did that herself, and Gilbert simply refused to pretend otherwise. Both readings can exist at the same time, but the clearest summary remains the simplest one. A woman posted something racist, lost her show because of it, and then blamed the colleague who would not defend it. And what Gilbert did after that is the part that changes the whole story. In fact, it is the reason the claim that things were somehow falling apart for her turns out to be so completely wrong. She saved the franchise everyone thought was dead. When ABC canceled Roseanne, it looked like the end of everything. Hundreds of jobs seemed gone. The #1 show on television had been blown apart. And at the center of it all was a star whose actions had made the situation impossible to contain. Sara Gilbert helped build the rescue. Working with ABC and the producers, Gilbert helped create The Connors, a spin-off built around the original cast except for Roseanne Barr. The setup was direct and painful. Roseanne Connor had died from an opioid overdose, a choice that tied the family's loss to the same crisis hurting working-class communities across America. Just as important, the deal was structured so Barr had no creative or financial involvement in the new show. Barr herself confirmed that, and it only deepened her anger. The Connors premiered on October 16, 2018, and against all expectations it worked. The show ran for 7 seasons. It protected jobs for the cast and crew. It kept the Connor family alive on screen. The couch was still there. The Afghan was still there. The working-class soul of the story stayed intact for another 7 years, lasting all the way to 2025. The way the show handled Barr's absence was bold from the start. The writers did not quietly replace the matriarch or ease her out in a vague way. They made her death central to the story and used it to speak directly to the addiction crisis that had already touched so many families like the Connors. It was a serious decision, especially for a network comedy, and it gave the spin-off a reason to exist that went beyond simple survival. Over time, the audience stayed with it. Critics continued to respect it, and the show proved that the emotional center of Roseanne had never belonged to one person alone. That took real skill. Gilbert inherited a franchise that had just exploded in public view, and she helped rebuild it into a show that kept going for another 7 years. That is not the story of someone whose future looks shaky. It is one of the strongest recovery stories television has seen in years. Gilbert also stayed at the center of that success. She played Darlene through all 7 seasons and remained an executive producer the whole time. As the show continued, Darlene became the emotional anchor of the family, the adult child trying to hold everyone together while life kept pressing in from every side. Gilbert first played that role at 13. Then at 50, she was still playing the same character while also helping shape the series behind the scenes. Very few actors get to grow up inside one role across nearly 4 decades. Even fewer get to help lead the show while doing it. That brings us to the events that doom-filled headlines like to use as proof that something has gone wrong. But when you look at them closely, they tell a very different story. The show ended with intention and respect. The Connors closed with a 7th and final season presented as a 6-episode farewell event. The 2-part series finale aired on April 23, 2025. This was not some abrupt collapse. It was a planned conclusion for a television family that had existed for nearly 40 years if you count the original Roseanne. Reports about the ending described it as a creative choice to finish well, not as a desperate shutdown caused by failure. Gilbert herself spoke about it in warm and grateful terms when she talked to people in April 2025. She said, "I think we just have such a good time and we laugh a lot. It feels like family, and because we did it for so many years, it's sort of deep in our soul. And so that is hard to imagine being without." She also said viewers got the chance to laugh and to feel at home with those characters. That does not sound like someone in crisis. It sounds like someone who knows she was part of something lasting. Bringing a successful show to a close after 7 seasons and after nearly 4 decades of the larger franchise is not a downfall. It is the kind of ending most television families never get. The other part of the so-called sad story is Gilbert's divorce from musician Linda Perry, the former Four Non-Blondes frontwoman, and a songwriter with major credits for artists including Pink, Christina Aguilera, and Gwen Stefani. The facts are clear. Gilbert and Perry began dating around 2011. They married on March 30, 2014. Their son Rhodes Emilio was born in February 2015. Gilbert filed for legal separation in December 2019 and cited irreconcilable differences, with August 13, 2019, listed as the date of separation. They were declared legally separated in October 2021. The divorce was finalized on December 19, 2024. What stands out most is how calm the arrangement was. They agreed to joint legal and physical custody of Rhodes, divided roughly 50-50. Neither pays child support. Both waived spousal support. Those are not the terms of a vicious split. They are the terms of two people who found a way to move forward without tearing each other apart. The public tone has matched that. Perry spoke about the end of the marriage without bitterness. She said things that end doesn't mean they're over or they're bad. It's just you're evolving into a different place. In an earlier interview, she had also said, "I'm still on an incredible adventure with Sara. I love her. I adore her. We have a beautiful family." She described it as part of life, part of a continuing journey. Gilbert, as usual, stayed private and chose not to drag the marriage through the press. In its own quiet way, that restraint says a lot. It also meant the tabloids never got the messy drama they kept hoping for. Of course, divorce is painful. No one should pretend otherwise. But a 5-year process handled without open warfare, with a stable plan for co-parenting, no support battle, and both people speaking with respect is not a public collapse. It is not scandal. It is not tragedy. It is two adults handling the end of a marriage with care, maturity, and a clear focus on what matters most. In many ways, the way Gilbert and Perry moved through, it offers a small example of how these endings can be handled with dignity. Sara Gilbert has never been the kind of figure who needs the loudest headlines to prove her worth. From the 6-year-old who wrote to agents to the teenager who made Darlene feel real, from the young woman who kept her education intact to the producer who built a 14-year daytime institution, from the executive who helped revive a classic and then saved its soul after disaster, she has moved through television with a quiet steadiness that refuses to match the chaos around her. The child who chose this life herself has spent nearly 4 decades proving that choice was not a mistake. The show that once made her famous ended on its own terms. The talk show she created ran longer than most. The franchise she helped rescue lasted 7 more seasons. And through public feuds, private endings, and the constant noise of an industry that loves to declare people finished, she has kept working, kept creating, and kept living honestly. That is not a story of things falling apart. That is the story of someone who learned early how to hold her own ground and never forgot how.